right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, I know there are 42 days until the election, but there is so much going on in our political world right now, and that the country is literally rotting from the inside out. But to be honest, there isn't a lot about that I have to say today that we won't say already. Instead, it is time to return to a story I promised you all I would stay on top of, and that the circumstances of how the now deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein was able to operate a child sex trafficking ring for decades by ensnaring, co-opting, and working in league with some of the most powerful people in the world. The Epstein case often moves in fits and starts. Largely, we're at the mercy of an opaque criminal justice system where the case against Epstein's alleged madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, continues to grind on and is sure for years to come to continue to do so. But we've learned some new things from that case, though not even close to what we were really promised. But the new information that spurred me to update you all on this today comes not from that, but from a little-noticed legal proceedings based upon three very interesting news reports which, seen in concert together, begin to reveal the depths of what we're really doing here. The first, as I mentioned, is this little-noticed legal filing in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Epstein is alleged to have engaged in some of his most heinous crimes. Now, the top prosecutor of the U.S. Virgin Islands is seeking more than 20 years of flight manifests from Epstein's entire fleet, which, according to the Mirror, has stirred, quote, panic among the many of the rich and famous. But it's not just the flight logs that have them panicking. The top prosecutor is also seeking, quote, complaints or reports of potential suspicious conduct and any personal notes written by pilots who observed Epstein and those who flew on his plane. Now, the flight logs and the manifest would provide one of the clearest pictures yet of exactly whom among the rich and famous cavorted with Epstein. It could lead to some interesting anecdotes, but ultimately, it doesn't serve our project. Our project is not just to know exactly who was involved, but to target the power structures that covered for him, whom he ensnared, who was complicit in enabling him, and in exploring exactly what they got out of it too. That's where new revelations from the incredible Broken Seeking Justice podcast come into play. We're going to have the host of that podcast here on the show sometime in the near future, but one of the details that they reported is simply too important to keep from you. That is that one-time personal chef for Epstein, Adam Perry Lang, is now cooperating with the FBI as to what exactly he saw while he worked for the pedophile between 1999 and 2003. Of particular note to our story in this regard is that Lang is known to have flown on at least 2 occasions on the same plane as Britain's Prince Andrew, who, according to UK media, is apparently facing quite a bit of heat from this revelation, given that federal prosecutors will have even more insight into detail of Andrew's knowledge or complicity of his actions, and raises the stakes even higher if he were to ever cave to international pressure and to answer questions under oath to FBI investigators. That is actually what I'm most interested in. What did the prince know, and when did he know about it? What did the palace know about what the prince knew, and when did they know about it? And at what point did they actively start a media spin campaign in order to keep the prince's name out of the press? And at what point did the media start listening? Those are the questions that, again, take us to the real heart of the matter. Which is discovering what sickness lays at the heart of our system, which enabled all of this for so long. And it's that latter question which actually brings me to something we briefly touched on yesterday's show. A new bombshell BuzzFeed News investigation into the world's largest banks, revealing that they routinely engage in criminal behavior and are let off scot-free by the very regulators tasked with keeping them in line. It's only after reading that story that I really came to understand the scale of a system that enabled Epstein. It's every bit as nefarious and scary as I imagined. The story from BuzzFeed details exactly how banks like JP Morgan, HSBC, Standard Chartered, Deutsche Bank, and Bank of New York Mellon are able to move money around for suspected or known criminals while paying very little price for doing so, even when the bank's own employees and U.S. government regulators know that something nefarious is going on inside the bank. BuzzFeed writes, quote, "The networks through which dirty money traverse the world have become vital arteries of the global economy. They enable a shadow financial system so wide-ranging and so unchecked, it has become inextricable from the so-called legitimate economy." Now, the investigation does not mention Epstein. It talks about oligarchs and criminals and despots and drug cartel members and more. But what it really does is reveal the exact and broader nature of the system that enabled Epstein for so long. It answers the question, perhaps, of where exactly he got his money from. And it answers a bigger question that I've had all along. How in the hell did Wall Street enable him for so long? Recall, a previous radar I did here examining New York State's fines against Deutsche Bank for knowingly keeping Epstein as a client despite knowing his criminal predilections, for seeking him out as a client despite his bad reputation, for failing to report that his advisors sought to withdraw millions of dollars in cash, and for enabling multiple payoffs that he sent to alleged victims across the world for private legal settlements. I couldn't really believe it at the time. It's Deutsche Bank, after all. It's a Wall Street institution. But these BuzzFeed documents reveal that Deutsche Bank is the same place where Bank of America employees reportedly flew to their London offices to confront the bank, tell them that they were engaged in some serious money laundering to the benefit of Russian oligarchs. And instead of listening, Deutsche Bank did what they did during the Epstein case. They didn't want to hear it. They literally threw Bank of America employees out of the building for telling them the truth. And here's another great clue as to who exactly runs things. At one point, the top financial regulator in the United Kingdom acknowledged in a letter that Deutsche Bank took on, quote, very profitable clients regardless of financial crime risks, and cautioned them that they were not leading on the issue area. But when the agency spoke publicly, it actually went out of its way to exonerate senior bank executives, saying that they were not aware of suspicious trading, and ultimately the banks paid only a very, very small fine. It's a small window into the shadowy world where the answer to what we all really want to know lies. And I'm not sure we're ever going to get the full story. But the more that we actually learn, the worse it gets for the people in power. It's really interesting, Crystal, to try and connect all of the dots here, because of course we start with this legal filing that was made in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's, something that has kind of been happening now for a long time.
They've been going after him aggressively,
right.
though.
And that's the thing, too, is that people at this point are kind of sick of like, oh, they're subpoenaing, whatever. It's like, well, is anything actually going to come of this? I think the bigger question we've always been interested in is like, what is this like broader system?
Right.
You can see that with the palace. But I think those BuzzFeed documents really show the answer. And as I was digging into more on Deutsche Bank itself, you could see that, like, in a way, Epstein was a small ball guy compared to some of the other criminals that they do business with and that they cover for on Wall Street. I mean, not just Wall Street, London, Singapore, all of the global financial centers in America. They have created and crafted a system where their outright corruption and criminality is quasi-legal. And it's just amazing to read the banality of it all.
Right.
And to see they're like, yeah, we have suspicious transaction report. As long as they report that to the Department of Treasury, they're in the clear. They actually will face no legal liability. It's just an amazing way to see systematized corruption before your very eyes. And we're talking billions and billions of dollars here.
Yeah, they're happy to take his money. The part that really should blow your mind is not only did they have him as a client and look the other way, they sought him out as a client.
In 2013.
I mean, after he'd already been convicted, after you should be able to know everything you need to know and all these suspicious transactions, and they didn't care because they were able to make a buck on him. And he's just one of many. And that's the thing that the BuzzFeed investigation really reveals is like, if you had any idea in your mind that this was sort of like a one-off situation, no. This is their standard operating procedure way of doing business. And Deutsche Bank seems to be utterly shameless, next level criminality, totally willing to do business with whoever as long as they can make a buck. But all of these other major banks are, equally complicit. They're very close to as bad as Deutsche Bank. Looking the other way, whether it's oligarchs, Russian oligarchs, money laundering, or drug cartels or organizations that are financing terror, they really don't care. And for them, the little fines and the slap on the wrist that they get, it's just a cost of doing business. There's no actual accountability, no actual penalty penalties, like in terms of prison time, what I'm talking about here, for any of the executives who would be involved. So what do they care? Doesn't matter to them whatsoever. And so I do think one of the things that has been so important about the Epstein case from the beginning is what is the system and the society that enabled this guy for so long? Because ultimately that's not just about Jeffrey Epstein. How many other people are getting away with God knows what, and everyone's looking the other way because they have, there's either dirt that exists on them that they're worried about, or the media, didn't want to lose their access to the powerful people that were involved, or people are making a buck off of whatever is going on, so they just pretend like they have no idea.
Yeah, and I just want to say again, this is why elections matter so much, which is that you would not know, I don't even know who the name of the person who is head of the Financial Crimes Division for the Department of the Treasury. But the person who wins the presidency controls who wins the Department of Treasury, who controls who runs that department, who then controls and decides whether we prosecute the people who get away with this stuff. And lo and behold, a lot of the times those regulators come from the financial industry itself, or they leave government and become heads of compliance at a different Wall Street bank. So you need to pay attention more to who is running the run-of-the-mill stuff within the government, because they're the ones who are enabling and allowing this type of stuff to pass every single day.
It's sort of like why elections matter and also why they don't matter, because what we've seen across multiple Democratic and Republican administrations is that they put the same Wall Street-friendly people in charge who don't actually aggressively go after these people.
That's exactly it.
Coming up on Rising, friend of the show, Ryan Grimm, is going to weigh in on Dem's strategy for how to block Republicans from picking RBG's successor when Rising returns.